Let's see if we're rolling here. And we're rolling here. Hello, I'm Bassam Habal, and I'm honored.
Bassam Ball.
Habal with an H.
That's Italian, right?
Arabic.
That's what I knew. Italian, Arabic, they're all the same, right? And you're from Barstow.
Barstow, yeah.
Well, isn't that where most Arabs live, in Barstow?
I thought they lived in.
Barstow's a party town. You never been here? They have this Motel 3 across from the 7-Eleven. Man, what a party town.
Nah, sadly I can't. What's that beep? Yep.
That's my phone leaving saying I got some email. That's first in 3 days. So, yeah.
So I'm with Murray Langston, also known as the Wizard.
Hey, I'm with Murray Langston too.
The Wizard of Whoopee.
The Wizard of Whoopee, the Prince of Puns.
The Prince of Puns.
The Merlin of Mirth.
Nice.
That's right. I still remember those. Merlin of Mirth, the unknown comic. Yep, that was me back in the day.
So
and a couple of nights too.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell me, you were just on something called Malt Shop Memories.
Malt Shop Memory Cruise. Yeah, it was pretty fun cruise. I hadn't done work in a long time. I hadn't worked a long time, but it was like Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons was on. Dionne Warwick was on to Miracles. All these acts from the 60s and 50s and the Shirelles. Just a whole bunch of acts. And I was the one comedian they asked to perform on there. So came out of retirement to do it. Yeah. So, but they actually paid me. So. So that was, and then they gave me a nice room and all that stuff. So I had a great time, yeah.
They give you free meals?
Oh, there's so many. Are you kidding? You been on a cruise ship?
Oh, yeah, yes, yeah.
The food is just nonstop, yeah, and it really was nonstop food. I mean, you don't want to start a diet going on a cruise, that's for sure, yeah. But it was great. It was great fun. In fact, I was only scheduled to do 2 shows in the lounge, and they turned away so many people. They asked me to play in the main room, the 1,000-seater on the ship, to do an extra show because I was obviously a hit.
Nice.
So that was nice to come out of retirement and get that kind of response. It was very nice. But that was my generation on that ship, so they all knew me. I don't think I would have had the same reaction on let's say a Carnival cruise. But this was like my generation, so they just came out in droves. So it was a great fun thing for me. I enjoyed it immensely. Yeah.
And how many shows a day did you?
No, well, I was scheduled for just 2 shows during
just
the
2 shows
9 days.
The entire cruise.
The entire cruise. I was only scheduled for 2 shows, and those were in the lounge, about a 300-seat lounge. Mm-hmm. But like I said, they were so packed, and they turned hundreds away each show. So they asked me to do a 3rd show, and of course, gave me extra money. So an extra $20 ain't bad. I can eat that senior meal at Denny's like 5 days in a row now.
The early bird special is calling.
Exactly. What the heck? So anyway, so it turned out to be a fun gig, and then came back, and then I just had 1 day off. Then took my daughter on another cruise, a Carnival cruise, but just for fun, just me and her. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was my pleasure. I don't know if you know, my daughter has Down syndrome. The one I took on the cruise.
Okay.
Yeah, so then she's my life pretty much. That's why I retired for years. All I care about is her right now. And she just turned 18 years old, so she's great. Yeah.
That's great.
I have 2 daughters. Then I have my musician daughter, singer, songwriter daughter.
And tell me a little about her.
She's was on 3 of Britney's last albums, and got a song that she wrote on her album. She really wanted to be a songwriter. Mm-hmm. And what she did is she can sound exactly like Britney Spears. So years ago when she was like 16, she sent a bunch of songs she wrote, but recorded them sounding like Britney Spears. And when they heard her sing, they went, wow, she sounds exactly like her. So they hired her on 3 of her albums. She worked on many of the songs like Circus. But her real aspirations were to become a songwriter. And she's starting to really sort of succeed now. She has, I think, about 4 or 5 songs on various albums, and it's starting to click, and so she's doing very well. It took her like 10 years though to finally start making a living at it, and she's finally making a living.
Great.
But as I mentioned, she still hasn't bought me a car, so or given me even the down payment for a car. So it's just not right, So I'm thinking of putting her up for adoption. Can you put a 27-year-old up for adoption?
To the best of my knowledge,
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure she's mine anyway. I keep telling her I have to get a DNA. I want to make sure, because she's really pretty. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. So, but no, she's doing really well. So I'm proud of her. Yeah, it's really interesting because she parallels me in a way. I just wrote a book. I don't know if you know my life story.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
What was it, Journey Through the Unknown?
Yeah. Oh, so you haven't heard of it?
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote that book, but and in the beginning of the book, I explained how I idolized Jerry Lewis as a kid, like 14, 15 years old. That was like wow, that's what I wanted to get into, what he was into, and that was my driving force from the time I was about 14, 13, 14. And identically, that happened to Maya, my daughter. When she was about 14, 15, her driving force was Britney Spears. She idolized her. And the funny part is, like, when I idolized Jerry Lewis, like, about 8, 10 years later, I worked with him on the Sonny and Cher show, which I was a regular on back in those days. I don't know if you know that. For 4.5 years. So, and then my daughter, same thing. She idolized Britney Spears, and a bunch of years later, she's working with her on her albums. So she parallels me in that odd way, which is interesting. Yeah.
Did you? A lot of people, I think myself would be one of them. You know, before I'm a musician now, but before I did
What do you
music,
play?
I play guitar and bass and sing. But before I did that, I was into magic. I was doing magic shows and doing puppet shows. So I always sort of considered myself, or when I look back on it, I always sort of saw myself in the performance role as a performer.
There was a drive inside you that wanted to do that, be a performer.
Performer, right?
Okay.
Before you idolized, did you have that as a kid, long before your love of Jerry Lewis?
You know, I've thought about that, and I don't know if I put that in my book, but it's really interesting to try to analyze why one gets into comedy. Like, I was born in a small town in Canada, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and they eventually moved to Montreal, which is where I was sort of raised in those early formative years. And so I got to watch movies and stuff, and you wonder if I'd have been stayed in that small town and never really got to watch Jerry Lewis movies, would I have been influenced the same? You know, I just don't know. You don't know what influences somebody. I mean, I believe we're all products of circumstance to some degree, and to a large degree, actually. And so I guess all the circumstances around my life at that period just sort of propelled me into this show business thing, from Canada. And but I spent, I got across the border and joined the military for 4 years just to get to Hollywood. So I took the hard road. Yeah, so, I was in the Girl Scouts for 4 years, broke a nail twice. It was not fun.
Did you sell any cookies?
See, now you're getting silly. That hurts my feelings. No, but I got my cookies a lot. A lot of houses of prostitution in the military in those years. No, I was on an aircraft carrier for 4 years. Yeah.
And I always find it interesting. You went to Vietnam?
No, I served during those years. I was in from 62 to 66, so I'm up there. But no, I never saw Vietnam. Thank goodness. I'm glad. No, I was very lucky and fortunate in the military. I also ended up being I sort of gravitated in the show business. It's very weird because I first joined the military, and I was from Canada, and I crossed the border and I joined up, and they just apparently take anybody. And so they stuck me in a radar. I was in radar for the first year and a half, scope dope in the radar room. And then after a year and a half, and I passed the test to become a petty officer, and they got a notice that they'd made a mistake, and they couldn't give me that rank because they'd made a mistake. I didn't have a clearance because I was Canadian, and I was working with all top secret confidential stuff. And so they put me into cleaning dishes and toilets and stuff like that, and took me out of the radar room, and I got real pissed, and I jumped ship and went back to Canada, and then came back after about 3 or 4 weeks. I got nervous. Anyway, when I came back, the captain turned on, I explained what happened, and he said, well, we sort of did you a disservice. It was our mistake also, not realizing you were a foreigner in our, control room, and so he offered me any job on the ship. Or a discharge. And I said, well, if you give me the radio station and TV station, I'll stay. So the next 3 years, I had my own radio show called Murray's Musical Merry-Go-Round of Music. And that was way before, because that was very similar to, Good Morning Vietnam. I ended up having my own, all the people, I became famous on that ship as this radio announcer. And even though I was only like 20 years old at the time, and learn how to play drums on the ship and formed a band and all that stuff. So I managed to, out of that mistake, turn it into something very positive and got in the show business and managed to have the last 3 years of my term in the military in doing show busy stuff.
What types of what types of music were you playing on your radio show?
Oh, well, just all the pop stuff at that time, would be, well, the Beatles were just breaking out then, they broke out in, I think, about 64, which would have been about right, yeah, and I did a lot of, what was it, Young Rascals. I was a big fan of the Rascals back then, if you know them.
Sure.
And just all the music that was popular at the time, I was playing on the station, and also playing with my band. I had a band called the Bounty Hunters that I developed while I was in the military too. So it was. Even though I hated the military, and when my discharge came up, I was so happy to get out. What I learned from the military is you have to listen to people that are not smarter than you. I mean, there's lots of people smarter than me, and I don't mind listening to them. I'll listen to anybody. But in the military, just because somebody's been in longer than you, and they have like maybe 15, 20 years, they're dumb as nails, but you have to listen to them, and because they have their longevity in the military. And so that was the one thing I hated about it, is that you had to listen to people you knew were idiots, And so that was one of the reasons I had to get out, yeah. Well, I mean, because I want to, again, that was just to set me off in my direction of Hollywood. That's all that military tour was, is I had to do that, Yeah.
Did you record anything with the Bounty Hunters?
We did, but it never went anywhere. Yeah, we were like, it was interesting because I got pictures. We were all in our 20s, and we dressed like cowboys, and we all dyed our hair gray, silver. So we had these 19, 20-year-old guys who all had our hair dyed silver. But we had some good sets. We played a lot of military things, and we all got out at the same time in New York. And we played a lot in some clubs in Yonkers and stuff like that before the band broke up. And I said it was time for me to head to Hollywood.
Were you doing mostly originals, covers, or
Mostly
combination?
covers. No, I think we did a couple originals, but that we all sort of wrote, but we never were together. What happened is our lead singer, his father, ended up dying and left him a lot of money. So he said, and he was from New Orleans, so he said, I'm off. When he left, and everybody else said, well, and that was the time for me to say, well, I'm off to Hollywood too. So.
What were name me two songs you guys used to cover?
Oh, I actually sang two songs in the band. As the drummer, I sang La Bamba by Richie Valens and the Beach Boys song, Do You Want to Dance? Do You Want to Dance?
Bobby Freeman?
No.
Bobby Freeman did the original of that.
Oh, he did?
Yep.
It was a Beach Boys version. No, is that it?
Do you want to dance under the moonlight?
No, not that one. I'm trying to remember what it was now. I'm blanking out. That's a long time ago. But we covered everybody from the Stones to the Beatles, and we just did a lot of cover stuff. The Rascals, like I said. Good Lovin' was that was just our ending song, was Good Lovin'.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was an interesting period of my life, but it didn't last that long, maybe 5, 6 months, and that was it.
And then what year did you end up in Hollywood?
66. I got out in 66 and maybe spent about 6 months with the band, and then when they broke up, I headed out to Hollywood. Yeah.
And what was your first job in Hollywood?
First job
in the
entertainment business?
Yes.
Oh, because I worked many years before I got into the business. I mean, I worked as a computer operator. I worked as a house painter. I worked as shoe salesman. I did everything. Till I got my first job, which was on Rona Martin's Laugh-In.
Okay.
You remember that show?
Sure.
Yeah. So that was my first job, was Rona Martin's Laugh-In, and then and I thought, you remember Tiny Tim?
Of course.
Yeah, he made it big. It was a very interesting story, which I wrote in my book, how I was in a computer room at Universal Studios, where I worked as a computer operator, and but I was just dying to get in the show business, and was struggling, trying to figure it all out. And when Tiny Tim made it huge, I went, that son of a bitch, he made it off the show doing this stupid song. I said, maybe I can make it. So I literally, and I did these silly impressions in the computer room where they're just dumb. I did a fork, tube of toothpaste. I did these ridiculous impressions that I would do. So I called up not having an agent and being totally naive, I just called up NBC and I said, can I talk to the producer of Laugh-In? And they said, just a minute. And all of a sudden, George Slaughter here, who's a producer of Laugh-In. And I said, yeah, I'd like to get on your show. And he said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm working on this impression of a fork. And he said, can you come down tomorrow morning at 9? That's how easy it was. So next morning, 9 o'clock, I'm at NBC, and they put me in this room, a bunch of writers, and they said, show us your fork. And I did this stupid little thing where I was very, very thin then, about 115 pounds. I did this little thing where I was a fork, and they just looked at me and said, okay, thank you, and I went back and I went, well, that was a waste of time. But then 2 days later, they called me. They said, report at 1 o'clock on next day for taping. And I was on the show 4 different times, yeah. I was doing these various impressions, and Rona Martin did all these lines on me. Now, at that time, I thought, wow, this is it. I'm going to be like Tiny Tim. And a few weeks later, when the show was on, I didn't even have a TV back in those days. So I went to friends to watch it, and it was like the biggest show on TV during that time. And next day, I'm walking down the street like this, hoping somebody recognized me, but nobody did. Anyway, the bottom line is the people in the computer room found out that I was on the show, and they wanted to train me as a programmer, and I didn't really want to do it, but they were training me, and they were going to put money into me to train me to be a programmer, and so they got mad at me. They said, "What we plan on training you, blah blah this and blah blah that, and what are you doing on TV?"
And you're going off as a fork.
Yeah, and I pretty much told them it was none of their business in a nice way, but they
You didn't tell them to fork off?
I should have, yeah, but they sort of told me to fork off, and they fired me. So
Okay, yeah.
so that's when I went into painting houses and selling shoes and all this other stuff for the next couple of years till at that time I was very, very, I didn't know anything about stand-up, and I was at Martin and Lewis, were my idols. So I found a guy, and we formed a comedy team called Jack and Murray, and we worked a bunch of these little places. We worked a little place on Sunset called Canopos with Cheech and Chong. You remember Cheech and Chong?
Of course, yeah.
Well, yeah, we were all, and Tommy Chong's from Canada too, but we all worked for Hamburger Night. There was a bunch of comics and singers that worked in this little club, and we didn't get, like I said, we just got a Hamburger Night paid, but we worked every night to like 5 people or 8 people, and it's an interesting period of my life. And then when the club folded, I don't know what happened to Cheech and Chong. I think they became very big. In fact, I talked to Cheech maybe about 6 months ago. It's interesting because a friend of mine called me and he said, I'm at a golf course here and Cheech is on the line, and I told him I knew you. So they called me up, and I couldn't remember the guy I was with. Jack and Murray, I told you when I worked with them, and he remembered it and reminded me. I said, I forgot who the guy was. And he said, it was Jack Murray. So Cheech remembered it, because we all remember those old days. So anyway, bottom line is I ended up going to Red Fox's club. Red Fox, you remember?
Sure.
He had a club right around up the street on La Cienega, and I worked with a bunch of guys over there doing stand-up and not stand-up, but sketches. I never did stand-up. It was all sketch comedy I did. That's all I was getting into. But it was all very dirty back then, and especially at Red Fox's club, opening for Red Fox. A bunch of us opened for him. But what happened at Red Fox's club is an agent for the Sonny and Cher show was in there and saw me and this black guy, Freeman, doing sketches together, and said, they're putting a show together. Would you like to audition for it? So, duh. And so we went and auditioned, and the same thing happened. We did these, here's an interesting thing. So we walk into the producer's office, and the producers look at me and they go, hey, weren't you the fork on Laugh-In? And I said, yeah. He said, we were writers on Laugh-In when you came in to do that. So they remembered me as the fork, like this was maybe 2 to 3 years later.
Great, yeah.
So that was interesting. But again, we auditioned for them. Me and Freeman did these sketches, and they didn't laugh at all. So walked out going, that was a waste of time. But 2 days later, got a phone call. We're hired for the Sonny and Cher show, for the summer show. Subsequently, the regular show. So we ended up being regulars for 4.5 years on the Sonny and Cher show. And I was actually selling shoes at J.C. Penney's at the time, so I was able to quit my job. So again, it was just struggling and going after that dream and pursuing it, and then that was a 4.5 year fun dream, that's for sure. Working with all the stars and just doing sketches. Yes, people tell me they're seeing it now because it's on Get TV or something. Sonny and Cher shows are being rerun now on Get TV.
Must be like in Boston, they had something called Me TV.
Well, I think it's all over the place now.
It was all retro shows and the good stuff. I like to say.
So that did great. But so basically, we're getting to the unknown comic now. What happened is those 4.5 years, I made a few dollars. I ended up doing a bunch of other TV series as an actor with Wolfman Jack and Bobby Vinton and the Hudson Brothers and Lola Falana. Anyway, I did a lot of work during that period off the Sonny and Cher show as a comedy actor. Nothing huge, but just working on going from one show to the next and making a living. Then then all of a sudden everything stopped, and I said, "Well, I'm going to own a restaurant." I was only like 30 by this time, so I'd had a good, nice little run, and so I invested in a nightclub restaurant, and I called it Showbiz. And as I say, I specialized in bankruptcy and became very successful. It was 2 of the hardest years of my life. But the club I had, guys like David Letterman started at my place. Michael Keaton started out when he worked as Michael Douglas. That's his real name, Michael Keaton. Deborah Winger was one of my waitresses there. Gallagher started out there. So many people started out at my place. So it was a fascinating little place. But 2 years later, I lost everything because I had no clue on how to run a club. What I learned from the club business is if you want to be a success, you pretty much have to be a dick, because everybody will take advantage of you.
Sure.
And I wasn't a dick, so everybody took advantage of me, and I just gave booze. Next thing I knew, I was busted. Every penny I made was lost. So that's how the Unknown Comic got started, because the Gong Show had already been on the air for about 6 months. And if you're in the union, they had to pay you whether you won or lost. So I didn't care about the Gong Show, $120, whatever it was. I was going to get $250 union money if I got on. And that's all I cared about was going on, but I didn't want my friends to see me because I'd been on all these TV shows, from Sonny and Cher to Wolfman Jack, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I said, well, I'll put a bag on my head. Nobody will know it's me, and I'll make a couple $100. Only thinking I would do one, and the first show I did, I went on and I said, "Hey, Chucky, baby, you and your wife ever make love in a shower?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, you should. She loves it." And that got a huge laugh. And Chuck loved it, and Chuck come running up to me after the show. He said, "I love that. Can you come back and insult me again?" And what it did is he was such a smart guy. He realized that he was making fun of all the acts, and to have somebody that made fun of him gave him a certain amount of vulnerability.
Sure.
And which is what he realized, and so it really worked for him. So he liked that, so he asked me to come out, so I ended up doing about 150 different Gong shows. So that's what sort of propelled. I never expected to do more than one, like I said. I just went on to get that initial 250. So I did end up doing 150. So you figure 150 times 250, that's over $300 I made right there. If you're any good at math. So I did okay.
Were there
There were two, maybe three.
Were there any particular acts that you remember that stood out? And were you there when they had the infamous popsicle twins?
Well, that would be the first thing I would say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was actually on the sideline watching them when they did that, and that was quite interesting. Yeah, when they did the popsicle thing, it got edited. It aired on the East Coast, but I think by the time it got here, it didn't get air on this coast because the censors got to it. But that was fascinating to watch them just eating those popsicles. Very, very funny bit. Yeah, so that would have been the standout bit for me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked Rip, and maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. I always wondered if there was someone that actually got gonged, who was actually legitimately upset that they got gonged, and maybe confronted some of the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Confronted some of the stars after the show, going, in a legitimate angry manner. Did that ever happen?
Oh, I got gonged once, which I wasn't supposed to,
Yeah.
by a drunk Anson Williams.
Interesting.
Yeah, he got drunk on his ass on the show and thought I was a regular act. Again, most people were, Jamie Farr and all those people, they all knew when the Unknown Comic came out, it was it was a regular bit, but he was drunk and gonged me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other guys, Jamie and whoever else was on, started beating him with the gong for gonging me. So it was cute. Turned out to be cute, yeah.
What is your take on Chuck Barris as a CIA agent? Do you buy that?
Well, no, I mean, he told me about that whole thing. What he said was obviously it was all BS, but again, such a smart guy. What he told me is that he said he started writing his bio because he thought, maybe people would be interested in his bio.
Yeah.
Then as he was writing it, he went, no, this is boring. Nobody's going to be interested in this. So that's why he decides, well, I'll write a parallel fictional character alongside of my real bio and make me and that was where he's a smart guy. Of course it was all BS, but it took a smart man to come up with that and create all the controversy around it, whether it was real or not.
Yeah, I always saw it as Chuck's way of saying that the media is in everyone's underwear drawer, and this is my way of getting back at them.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
No, he was a smart guy. I mean, he created all those shows. Treasure Hunt, Dating Game, Newlywed Game, Gong Show. Those were all. Well, the Gong Show he didn't really create. That was brought to him.
Mm-hmm.
A guy named Chris Beard. It was actually a hit in Australia first, and a guy named Chris Beard brought it to him. But he produced it. But he saw the value of it, and then him and Chris got in a huge fight, and then he ended up buying him out and going on with the Gong Show, which became a huge hit. Now, I guess they're doing it again. Somebody's reviving it, right? You've heard that, of course.
Yeah, Rip was telling me about that, and I was telling him that I remember because I was a huge fan of the show, and I remember in '86 or '87 there was a new Gong Show that took place. I don't know who the host was. Obviously, none of the classic panelists, judges were there, and to me, without the classic panelist and without Chuck, it just wasn't the Gong Show.
Yeah,
it was another variety show.
The Gong Show was, to a large degree, it was Chuck Barris, and the way he let all those guys around them participate. Like Gene was a guy who swept afterwards. He had his writers doing various characters, his lighting guys, anybody who was on the crew that could come up with an idea, he put them on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made it really extra special, I think. Because somebody called me about 2 weeks ago for some magazine asking me about the new Gong Show that's coming out. And I said, the thing you have to do is, the thing about the Gong Show was that it was its lack of slickness,
Sure.
and it was the first reality show. It just let pretty much anybody who was on that show, got on and if they had any kind of sense of talent, they or not.
Sure.
But they let anybody off the street could get on that show. And so if you do it again, they got to do it without having any kind of slickness to it. It's just got to appeal to everybody. Like everybody's got to feel, oh, I could get on that show.
Sure.
You watch The Voice. Not everybody goes, I can get on that show. Or even America's Got Talent. Those are really talented people that go on those shows. But the Gong Show has got to appeal that everybody sitting there is going, I'm going to put a lampshade on my head and get on that show. And that was the appeal, I think, of the first Gong Show and the first sort of reality show that just anybody felt that they could get on that. And pretty much anybody did. But you'd be amazed that besides myself, the percentage of people that got on the Gong Show were just a whole bunch of actors in L.A. who just wanted that union money, like I said. You probably didn't know that.
No, yeah.
That 250, so many of those actors were just union people that just trying to think of anything and would show up at the audition just to get on. I know so many of them. I bet you a good 20-25% of the actors on that show were union people that just needed the money.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that Of course, there were some acts on there that became later famous, like the guys from Oingo Boingo were on there.
Were they? I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
Cheryl Lynn that did the song "To Be Real."
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
Yep, she
yeah.
was on there. Paul Rubens,
Well, was he on there?
he was on there. Yep.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Okay, it's not what I didn't know. See, I didn't know a lot of stuff. And I
Sure.
still don't know a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, like I don't know why I'm talking to you. So there's a lot of stuff I still am
I'm
confused
grateful you
about.
are. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, okay, interesting.
What do you remember about the doing the movie, the Gong Show movie?
To be honest with you, there was that one girl, and me and Freeman were in the dressing room, and it's the first time I ever had a girl suck me and my other buddies' dicks at the same time. That's really true.
Which girl?
I forget. She was like some hooker with big, huge boobs, and in this dress, she wanted to get.
Was she one of the acts?
Yeah, she was somebody. I forget what she was. She was in the movie.
Okay.
And I dressed him. She said, "Can I blow both of you guys at the same time?" Sure. I mean, I'll do anything once. That's actually a true story. Yeah, yeah. But so that's probably my most memorable experience
Okay.
of the Gong Show movie. Otherwise, just show up for a couple of days and do whatever I did, and I don't know. A lot of that period is just. I was working all the time, and it was like a fun period of my life.
Sure.
But my life has always been like that. It's always been a tremendous amount of fun. I've had a blast,
That's great.
and still do. And I never was a workaholic. I never made big money, I mean, I'd work a couple of weeks in Vegas and then go party in Hawaii and just enjoy my life. And so that was my life, was just going, wow, I'm having a good time. And I always had a good time. Yeah. So, and in a way, I got I sort of thank Chuck, but I do have enough confidence in myself where I believe that had I not created the Unknown Comic or the Gong Show never existed,
Yeah.
I still would have made a good living in this business.
Sure.
Because I had the drive and the desire, and if you, just two things you really need. If you have the desire and the discipline, you'll make it. Those are two very important things I have, though. The desire, and which most people, a lot of people have the desire, but they don't have the discipline to go after it. Like in all those years that I'd be going to the Comedy Store and all those nights working for nothing, that's the discipline, to get up and do it over and over again when you ain't getting paid for it, and then bombing and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's where the discipline comes in, going after it, yeah. So I did have that. I managed to have though, but I was very lucky. Again, I started making, interestingly enough, because Rip was part of this too, before the whole onslaught of comedians, when I first started making money at the Sahara Hotel in Vegas from the Gong Show, and in those days I was offered a job at the Sahara in the lounge because of the Gong Show at $5,000 a week, which was like huge. I mean, it's huge money today.
Right.
So back then, that was huge money. But I had to hire a trio, so I ended up hiring a trio, and I ended up hiring a couple of girls. End result was, that $5,000, I ended up owing money each week because I put so much into my show. In other words, back then it was important to me to make sure that the audience was getting entertained. Again, it took some discipline,
Sure.
rather than take the $5,000 and go. But I didn't have an act.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this bunch of stuff for the Unknown Comic, but I needed to put an act together. So I worked very hard and put an act together and got great reviews and all that stuff and had a great time. But again, it was just fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was there was a lot of stress and making sure that you get a lot of stress, because there were nights even during those years where I was struggling and I would bomb because I was still learning as a stand-up how to do stand-up.
Sure.
Because before the Unknown Comic, I was an actor, and to this day I always consider myself more as an actor doing comedy than a comedian, as a stand-up, because that's a character up on that stage when I do it, I mean, I only do 10 minutes of the bag. The rest, I do an hour show, like
Sure.
on a ship. And the rest of it is me without the bag and
Yeah.
just having fun and kicking ass. So, but it's again, to this day, to me, it's all about having, life is, I believe we're here one time. So I say go for the gusto.
Sure.
I don't think we're going anywhere after this. I think it's lights out. So I try to have as much fun as I can while I'm here.
Now, the bag. I read that you were first unbagged on the
Real People.
on Real People.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's where I first decided to get some. Yeah, because you know, at that time, I went. Again, it was not a big deal. The bag was never that important to me. I don't know
Sure.
why. It wasn't even. You know, the interesting thing is, I hated the unknown comic. Back in those days, if I walked in a room and the Gong Show was on and I was about to come on, I'd walk out of the room. I hated watching myself. I thought this guy was an asshole. It was just jerky, and I hated it. And I could never understand why people liked it, but they did. But I did not like watching myself on those shows. But my priority back in those days, as it is today, was just make some money doing what I really enjoy, and enjoyed the aftermath of it all. You know?
Sure.
Yeah. I never had the desire to be a huge star. You know, it just wasn't there for some reason. So to me, it was just having fun. That was the thing I saw. I think in Jerry Lewis was, even though his wasn't, but the psychology behind it was this guy was just having fun on screen, and that sort of implanted itself in my brain.
Now, who unbagged you on Real People?
Well, that was Skip Stevenson. Again, Skip, how that came about, Skip Stevenson and John Barber were on those shows, and they both used to hang out at my club, the club I had for a couple of years. Skip worked there all the time. John Barber used to come in there all the time. And so they knew me personally. So so when the Real People, I mean, it was their idea. Like, hey, come on and unbag yourself on the show. And so, but it didn't really do anything, you know. I mean, I went on the show and unbagged it, and then that was it. It didn't spur my career anywhere. It didn't do anything for me, but it was, I don't remember what it was. I was just going from one thing to the other. What happened is I did a few of those things, then I wanted to do movies. I actually worked Vegas a lot. I was actually the first person to ever put 3 comics on a bill in Vegas. I had the write-up, you know. I mean, now there's all kinds of comedy clubs.
Sure.
But it was at the Landmark Hotel, and I was the first. I have the write-up. I was the first person. Was me and Elaine Boozler and Roger were the first 3 comics on the same bill act. They both opened for me in Las Vegas. So that was my next venture. That I want to do movies, and I want to do. So, I mean, I've done everything. So I did a few movies then, and I said, well, I'm just going to do a movie here and there. And I did a movie about homeless people, a movie. So I did, you know, again, it's been, if something interests me, I moved into that direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was never, ever about the money, never, ever about becoming famous, just having fun.
Just the love. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I read, you were on Candid Camera.
Well, I did that with Dom DeLuise. Dom got to host the last Candid Camera. You know, don't know if you remember that. Yeah,
The
last Candid Camera that I did was Dom DeLuise was the host of it.
Okay.
You know,
what happened to Alan Fun?
Well, he left it. In fact, his daughter. I did a bunch of sketches with his daughter. Joni Fun. What was her name? We actually did one funny bit together. That was really funny that we did. And I wrote a lot of the bits on Candid Camera. So I did a whole bunch of those. But it was just, again, I've done over 800 TV shows.
Sure.
When you put them all together. You know, that was just a batch in that year, you know, that I did the Candid Camera stuff. But I was close friends with Dom, too, Dom DeLuise, and, you know, Ruth Buzzy.
Sure.
Yeah, well, she's godmother to both my girls, you know. She was actually in the room when my older daughter was born at Cedars-Sinai. So Dom and Ruth were, you know, very close social friends during those years. And yeah, that was just, I think that was about 6-8 months of work for me, and it was a lot of fun because I wrote a lot of them.
Do you remember any favorite bit you did?
Bits that I did
on Candid Camera?
Yeah, I did. One was I went into an emergency room with a sword sticking through me. You know, we set up the sword that I was teaching these students, and they actually got me. And the girl was an employee, a temp employee, And she was freaking out because she would go, doctor, and the doctor was an actor. She didn't know that. But there's a guy here has a knife sticking through him. And I was told, yeah, can I see the doctor? And the doctor's saying, well, does he have insurance? And do you have, oh, I haven't, I'm not sure. I have my card somewhere, but it's not here. And, he keeps telling her that, he can't see me unless you can verify my insurance. And this poor girl's freaking out because I'm holding this knife that's going, I'll stick it all the way through me. But the other one I liked was done with Alan Funn's daughter. That was a fun one where we were sitting in a restaurant. And what was the bit? It was called a mark. When a person would come into the coffee shop, sit at the counter, then we, as the two people in the episode, me and Joni Fund, I think her name was Joni Fund, we would sit on either side of the person in the coffee shop. Now, and then we would copy everything the person in the middle would do. So everything he ordered, like you say, yeah, the waitress come over to me, yeah, I'll take 2 eggs over medium with a side of bacon and toast, make the toast crisp. Then the waiter turned to me and goes, yeah, well, I'll have 2 eggs over medium with toast, make the toast crisp. And turned to her, she'd say, and everything. And then when they served the meal, as he ate, we would copy everything, drink the coffee at the same time. It was just hysterical because you're looking at these two people are doing everything you're doing on either side of you. And what he really got us is then he pulled out a cigar at the end, and we didn't have any cigars, but the producer, who happened to be at that time was Rack Clark, Dick Clark's son. He produced a lot of those episodes. There just happened to be a liquor store next door, and he had one of the guys run over and grab 2 cigars and slip them to us. So this guy smoked a cigar all of a sudden we both pull up a cigar and light them. And then the guy just went freaky. That was that. No, I love Candid Camera because that was a show I loved to do. It was just a fun show. But I loved all the shows I did, though. I know. Wolfman Jack was a great show, too. I wish they would rerun those. The guy who produced them, though, he can't, because there was so much music on it, because getting the rights for all the music is really, really difficult. Because those would be great shows to see again. But I asked him, his name is Jay Harvey, he said the unions are so strict with all the music from then, it'd be very hard to pay everybody off with the money they would make on reruns. But he was a super nice guy, too. What a wonderful guy he was, Wolfman Jack. But as I mentioned in my book, I mean, I got to, party all night with Elvis. How many people can say they did that?
I didn't know that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, threatened by Frank Sinatra on the phone. That's a great story. Spend Christmas Eve with Lucille Ball. How many people can say they did that at Lucy's house? Spend Christmas Eve with them.
What was Elvis like?
Elvis was really, really cool. That was actually a result of the Sonny and Cher show because we'd made friends. Me and Freeman made friends with Bobby Gentry. Bobby Gentry, yeah. Ode to Billy Joe. And so me and Freeman were in Vegas. And we lost all our money playing. We just went up there for a weekend, and as we're leaving, we see Bobby Gentry at the Desert Inn. And so we said, oh, she's up there. We should go say hi to her, just say hi, because we'd made friends with her. She's all really, really nice to us. So we go backstage, and they said her show was just over. So we say, Freeman and Murray are here. We'd like to say hi to her. So they bring us backstage. We go, hey, Bobby. She gives a hug. She says, oh, I got a friend here I'd like you to meet. And so we turn and it's Elvis. Holy crap. Just a friend. Anyways, and my friend Freeman, the black guy I talked about that I worked at the Red Fox Club that we got to the Sonny and Cher show. He was from Mississippi too. So they just started talking and then because I had my club then too. This was when I had my nightclub. So I'm offering Elvis. I said, you'd really help me out. My club's going down the tubes. I can pay you $50 if you could just show up. And he laughed. He said, but I remember I made $50 when I was a truck driver. That's all I made. And but the funny part about that, we ended up hanging out. So anyway, he says, come on, let's go to my place. So we all got in a car and went down, and Linda Thompson was with him. Linda Thompson, that was his girlfriend back then.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she was with him for many years. So we all got in the car and we went over to his hotel, where his cronies, and we stayed there till the biggest thing I remember, well, 2 big things. One is he was heavily into karate, and every time I made Elvis laugh, my brain would go, you fucking made Elvis laugh. It was just freaky. Like he wanted me. He went and got dressed in his white karate outfit, and he wanted to show everybody. In my movie, he said, first you go for that, then you go for a neck, and then you go for the groin. I said, well, if you go for the groin, do I get dinner in a movie? And he would laugh, and so it was striking. It was just a fascinating night, and like at 5 o'clock in the morning, he got his guitar, and everybody sat around the couch. And he started singing, "Are You Lonesome?" I was sitting like right next to him, like I'm here and you're there, and there's maybe a dozen people in the room.
Sure.
And when he started singing, "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" I was just like freaky, yeah. And I asked, because Linda Thompson, I remember her because she had tons of turquoise jewelry, and I became a Facebook friend of hers. And I asked her, I said, "You probably don't remember, but I spent a night partying with Elvis." And she wouldn't remember me, but she said, as soon as you mentioned Bobby Gentry, she said, I remembered that night immediately, because Bobby was obviously there. But it was quite a night that I spent with him, yeah. And the shame of it was he wanted me and Freeman to come to the show. He said, "Guy, why don't you guys come to the show?" And we had no money, but we didn't say we were broke. Yeah. We couldn't even stay another night, so we went home. And I'm so sorry we didn't stay another night and go to his show the next night, because he practically begged us to come to the show the next night, because we just had a great time laughing and joking with him. It was pretty surreal.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What about? We're wrapping this up soon. What about Frank yelling at you?
That's a fascinating story too, because I had this friend named Joe Battaglia, who's since passed, but he had this gruff voice, And he loved show business too, but he was just a guy. He managed a couple of girls. I've known him a long, long time. So I'm shaving one day in my house, and the phone rings, and I hear this voice, "Hey, Murray Langston." I go, "Yeah." Now immediately I think it's Joe Battaglia, this friend of mine. I say, "Yeah, what do you want, Joe?" "This is not Joe, you cocksucker. This is Frank Sinatra." I mean, he's talking like that. "You ever mention my fucking name on TV, I'll break your fucking legs. You understand me?" And I'm laughing. I said, "Fuck you." I said, "I'll break your fucking legs too, okay? Well, let's break each other." I'm joking with him, And he's getting pissed. "Look, this is Frank Sinatra, you motherfucker." He's cursing me out, and every time he curses me, I'm laughing, and I make him laugh. Finally, after this going on for a few minutes, he said, "This is Frank Sinatra." I said, "Yeah, all right, sing my way, asshole." Next thing, bam, he slams the phone down. Again, no, I go back to shaving. Phone rings again. A couple minutes later, and I pick up the phone. "Murray Langston?" And he said, "This is Milton Berle." He said, "You recognize me?" And I recognized Milton Berle's voice. He said, "I guess you didn't think you were talking to Frank." And I go, "Wow." And first of all, it didn't react to me because he said, "Don't mention my name." And I didn't do Sinatra jokes, in my act. I never did Sinatra jokes. But what Milton Berle told me, he says, there was a show called Make Me Laugh. You ever heard of that?
I was about to ask you about that.
I did a whole bunch of those.
I remember that, yeah.
I did them as the unknown and without the bag, too.
Yeah.
So I did them a bunch of ways. And then he told me the joke. He said there was a joke about a halfway house. And I went, oh, basically, and what it was, I was running the material, and so I put a bunch of stuff for a newspaper. I said, yeah. And so I threw this in. Frank Sinatra is going to open up a halfway house for girls who don't go all the way. I mean, it's pretty simple. It doesn't seem like a very harsh joke.
Yeah.
But I could tell Milton Berle was on my side. He said, "Look, he's going a little crazy.
Sure.
He's getting old, and blah blah this." But the fascinating thing about that, so he says, "Don't worry, I'll try to talk to him again. Keep him off your back." I mean, he was going to send guys over to my house, but you don't even have to worry about this guy. If he just tells somebody, guys will come over. I mean, there's a famous Shecky Green line where Shecky says that Sinatra saved my life. These 4 guys were kicking the shit out of him, and Sinatra said, "All right, that's enough, guys." In other words, he told a joke, and Sinatra had a bunch of guys kick the shit out of Shecky Green. True story. So anyway, I called the producer, George Foster was his name. So I call up, I think I better have him edit that joke or something out of any future thing. So I call up, I get George Foster. "George, you're never going to guess who just called me." And he goes, "Frank Sinatra?" I said, "What do you mean? How do you know?" He says, "Well, how do you think he got your number?" I said, "What the fuck did you give him my number for?" He said, "Well, I don't want to break my legs." So he said, "No, we'll work on it." And then that story went around L.A. I mean, the agents knew about it. Everybody knew about it. That story went around. And then the woman, Kitty, who wrote his bio, Kitty Kelly.
Kitty Kelly?
Kitty Kelly.
The same woman that did the Nancy Reagan autobiography.
Okay. Well, she called me up
Yeah.
about maybe 10 months later, saying, "I'm writing a book about Sinatra, and I'd like to include that story about him threatening you." And I said, "It never happened." I said, because I didn't want her putting it. I said he was still alive.
Yeah.
I said, but I put it in my book. The whole story is in detail
Sure.
in my book. But yeah, she called me up wanting to write it. Yeah, so that was fascinating. Again, there's so many just different things, happening. I mean, happened in my life that were so much fun. Jim Carrey did his first TV show with me. I mean, like I said, Cheech and Chong, all those guys I started out with, and became huge. Whether it's Letterman or Leno, those all guys I just talked about. Robin Williams, we used to double date. It's quite a fascinating period of my life.
Could you recognize when this guy has talent? If he keeps it up,
Robin, yeah, actually you could. You knew Robin was going to make it. Everybody saw. When he came to town, it was like, what the fuck? The word had already gotten out because he came in from San Francisco that this guy was incredible. He would just go on stage. Well, Robin, he would go on stage and he would stay there. He would bomb because people didn't know who he was, but he would stay there and be relentless till he got to you. Mm-hmm. See, I was like the opposite. If I got on stage and I didn't go after the first 3 minutes, I wanted to get the fuck out of there. So he was like the opposite of me. So he had a different kind of drive than I did. His was, and a talent. He had a brilliant mind. I mean, I have a fairly decent comedy mind, but I would not compare it to some people. I mean, Jon Stewart to me is like a genius.
Yeah.
Certain people out there are just geniuses, and I wouldn't even remotely compare myself to them. Even though, like I said, I had the confidence where if I had more drive to be successful, I would have been, but I lost it. Actually, it was Joe Battaglia was the reason I lost it, because I saw a lot of people that gave up everything for show business, and but they ruined their personal lives, destroyed their personal lives, and that was not going to happen with me. Like even when my older daughter, when I retired pretty much from the business to raise her as a single dad.
Sure.
And because that became my priority. My priority was always about, like I said, enjoying today.
Sure.
Not worrying about becoming really famous. Because it was a Kevin Meaney who just died. It was a very funny comedian. He said, and he had a series for a year. He said that was the worst. He said he was so excited to get his own series. He said it turned out to be the worst year of his life. It took away and almost ruined his whole family and everything. So it can have not to say that happens to everybody. I mean, I got to know a lot of very famous people who, well, like Carol Burnett was an absolute, delightful lady.
Sure.
But she made it late in life, and you could tell she really enjoyed her and I don't have anything against it. I mean, there's a possibility had I clicked with the right TV series that I could have made it huge, but it wasn't something that I necessarily needed.
Sure.
I explained to my daughter one time, those 5 people on Friends, they're just lucky. Had they not just connected with the right producers, the right agents to get on that show at that time, because had that show not have been created, most likely none of those 5 people would have become famous.
Sure.
Because there's just so many people trying to make it, Maybe one of them might have gotten to a certain level, but the odds of them all becoming really famous, like off that show, would never have happened. Just right place, right time. Has a lot to do with it, and the right talent too. Yeah, but it's all got to connect. It's like winning the lottery, and I've never bought a lottery ticket in my life to this day. I don't believe in that. I'd rather just enjoy the ride. Whether it's includes a lot of money or success, or not. I can be just as happy just working on my property as I am in front of an audience. I enjoyed like being in front of the audiences and making them laugh. It was great. But I don't need it,
Sure.
Yeah. And it's fun. Like I said, that's what I'm all about, is fun.
How do you see the history of, or just comedy in general, changing from the time you were involved in it?
Oh, that's what I was going to make a point earlier. When I was, my first job at the Sahara, when I was making the money, I went and looked at, there was less than 100 comics in the entire country making a living at comedy. I mean, the big ones back then were like Bob Hope, because the only place people were making a living, stand-up comics, were the Playboy clubs. And a few, but there were literally less than 100 comics making a living of, let's say, 100,000 and more. in the business, and I was actually one of those 100, less than 100 people. I went, wow, that's pretty incredible. Now he probably got about 5 or 10,000 different comics out there, making a decent living, you know.
Sure.
But that was an interesting period. I don't see it's you know, if it's like people ask me, you know, what do you think of so and so? Anybody can get on stage and make people laugh for an hour. I have to admire because I know what it takes. My what I think is funny may not be, you know, equal to what somebody else, because comedy is so subjective. I mean, a lot of comedians I don't find funny, but everybody else loves them.
Sure.
There's other comedians that I like Louis C.K. I like, and Louis C.K. mentioned me as one of his inspirations too.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, in some article he said that I was one of his major inspirations. And I mean, I find Amy Schumer, you know, talented, but she doesn't click with me.
Sure.
You know, certain people just don't, even though they're very talented. And I think, but there's some really talented, funny people out there. There really are. I mean, just newcomers you never even heard of. There's a whole bunch of them. I saw one on the Carnival cruise. This, blanking on his name, some black comic. And he was just brilliant. And, you know, whether he'll ever make it or not, who knows? But he was just great. Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of great talent out there. There's thousands of them out there. And that's why it's a little more difficult, I think, today than when I started out.
Okay.
Because there's not as many jobs for the thousands of comics that are out there now. So it's a little more difficult, I think. So, yeah. But it's going to go on. People are funny. People just got that funny bone. They're going to have a good time and make people laugh.
Sure.
But like I said, I figured myself, most people say that most comics are like sad people on the inside, and I've never been one of those, though. I've just enjoyed it all.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's always important. You know,
It
sometimes because you'll meet somebody who's on stage persona. It's funny. And you go, wow, I can't wait to meet this guy. And he turns out to be a miserable SOB.
Oh, there's a lot of assholes. A lot of really good people out there, but there are a lot of assholes. Then you have your aloofs, like Letterman was a very aloof guy, not a very friendly guy at all. But I mean, I got along with him. Like I said, he started at my club, but he's not a guy that would ever hang out with hardly anybody. But he did stick to his close friends. Like Jimmy Walker, he kept him on the show, and Tom Dreesen, he kept him around. So, it takes a different kind of personality to become really successful in comedy, I think. But there's all different forms of it, just like there's, you know, country music, rock music, folk music, just different styles of comedy too. I'm probably on the end of that shtick comic, you know. Phyllis Diller, Henny Youngman, that's where I'm at. I'm a machine gun one-liner in a club, and there ain't many of those left. Yeah. I think Phyllis Diller, I can't even think of anybody that's left that does it like I did it. Yeah. It's a different breed of comedy out there, but everything changes, you know. And if you ain't ready to go along with the change, you might as well just, you know, buckle up and die. So I'm willing to go along with the changes, yeah.
Do you see yourself now? You've been doing some shows. I think you did some shows, obviously beyond the cruise.
Well, I did.
You did some.
Well, I did one. I started out. I did one. I did the Borgata in me and Jimmy Walker in New Jersey.
Okay.
I took 3 gigs. One in Denver, and then the Borgata in New Jersey. But see, that was there was 3 of us, me, Jimmy Walker, and this Gary Delana. We only each did 20 minutes, so it was such an easy gig. It's like 1,200 people. Show was packed every night, not because of me or Jimmy. They just packed that room.
Right.
The hotel does, and that was like way too easy. It's like it was frustrating because you're on 20 minutes and you want to do an hour. And you got to go off at 22 minutes. It was like. So they want me to go back, but I said, I have to do 30 if I go back. I said, but you know, even the cruise people, even when I was out there, and I enjoyed the whole thing, but when I was out there in the middle of the ocean, Puerto Rico, I went, I feel like I don't exist. You know, it's like, I'm way in the middle of nowhere. And I miss my daughter and everything, and then, you know, some people have that show business life, and it never really meant a whole lot to me, like I said, yeah. if they asked me to do it again, I'm not even sure that I would. The only reason I would do it again is if I took my daughter, my daughter with Down syndrome with me. Then I would do it again. Otherwise, I wouldn't. And it was like 9 days. I went, okay, I had fun with the shows, but then all those other times, what am I doing here? I want to go home, you know. So, so it's a little different. I'm a little different, than most people.
Could you see yourself doing other shows in the out in the country?
It's got to be something. See, I get them asked to do comedy clubs all around the country all the time, and even in my hometown, they keep calling me the Comedy Nest. I just don't. I don't like to work clubs where you got to go. You're in a motel for 23 hours. You do your show, and then you got 23 hours to kill.
Yeah.
That never appealed to me. See, I work in Vegas a lot. If I got a gig in Vegas, I'd do that because I got tons of friends there. I've owned homes there, and that was like a home. So I used to enjoy that. But to go to some city, I mean, if I became through some freak of nature, big, huge again, do like one-nighters somewhere, that I could do. I don't mind doing one-nighters. Like I said, the Borgata, I really did that just to prepare for the cruise because I knew I had to do an hour show on the cruise.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was a reason for that gig, and they've been asking me to go there a long, long time too. A lot of people ask me to do gigs all the time. I just don't care about doing gigs. Doesn't mean a whole lot to me to get out there, and I like doing it, and when it's done, but it's not that important to me. My life with my kids is much more important to me, and my life just enjoying my wine and hanging out is much more important to me. Yeah.
And finally, who do you write? I notice you usually post on Facebook. I'm one of your Facebook friends.
Oh, you are? Okay.
And
so I put stuff. See, a lot of people think I do that for them. It's strictly for me. Seriously, it's for me to keep my brain operating. People, and I appreciate it. A lot of people do really send me really nice things, saying thank you. You made my day today. I laughed, and I really like that. And if you notice, Sundays I always put inspirational stuff on Sundays. But that's really for me because I don't do the stand-up, so I got to keep my brain operating and functioning in the comedy world. And I find it really works because I have my most fun times are like when I go to a restaurant and I joke with everybody. I'm one of those guys who just jokes all the time. And that's my most fun times, And to think about the ship, that was fun too, because you're stuck with all those people who saw me. So I was joking with them all through the ship, and so I had a fun time. But it wore me down after a while now, because then you got to feel like you're always on.
Okay.
Yeah, but so like I said, I'm not out to at this stage of the game, especially. I don't care about making it.
Yeah.
It's not in my goal. It's not in my bucket list at all. I'm just enjoying the fruits of what I went through all those years.
Sure.
And but like I said, it was just a great fun ride. But I think right now maybe Rip Taylor and me and Jimmy Walker should do a show in Vegas and call it The Last Comics Barely Standing, something like that.
Yeah.
With, Rip come out with his cane, and my other poor buddy, he's almost dead, Jerry Van Dyke. Jerry Van Dyke.
Is he Dick's brother?
Yeah, Dick's brother. Yeah, we're pretty close friends for years, and he just had a horrible, not just about a year ago, a car accident where he was almost killed, like broke every bone in his body.
Wow.
So he's barely hanging in there too. But we worked a lot together. I used to do those 3 acts together, like I said. So I've worked with Rip and I've worked many times together, on various gigs. In fact, I did one with him, and because I booked those shows, me and Rick, I think it was Johnny Dark, me and Rip, in Riverside at Laughlin, and we're all up in a room, and it was an earthquake, and he come running to our room, screaming. He was petrified because there was an earthquake. But Rip's a good guy. Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah. But I've had a good run.
All right. Well, it's been a real honor and a pleasure talking to you.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make it out here. Yeah.
And thanks for having me come by. And
no problem.
And we'll see you. We'll see you when the future gets here.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, it's going to be hanging around for a while. I plan on living to at least 130, so we got some time yet. So I'm going for it. Yeah.